Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Champ. Ice frosted the windows of the farmhouse, and the smell of homemade spiced apple cider filled the air. Christmas was a time of peace and joy, but this year, Mac Chambers found little to be happy about. At 15, this year was his toughest one yet. He stared deep in thought into the flames of the fireplace. The fire snapped and flared, and Mac's eyes were drawn to the glowing embers. What did Grandpa say about the embers? That's right. He said when he was a little boy, he watched the coals and pretended that each one was its own little world, a happy village or a craftsman's workshop. He sure knew how to tell a story. I'll never look at embers without thinking of you, Grandpa. Yes, this had been a difficult year, and the holidays only seemed to heighten the losses Mac had suffered. First, Corey moved to Colorado. I never thought I'd say goodbye to him. Why did his parents have to get a divorce anyway? I knew they argued a lot, but why did Corey have to leave and go all the way across the country? I know he didn't have any say about the move or the divorce, but man, I miss having my best friend. The two boys kept in touch through social media, but it wasn't the same as being constantly together. We'd been friends since we were 3. Mac could hardly remember a time when he hadn't had Corey in his life. Suddenly, 15 felt very lonely. If there had been a year when he needed his best friend nearby, this had been it. In March, I broke my arm and missed the entire second half of baseball season. Coach said he was going to start me at first base in the next game. I just had to get hurt playing a stupid game of flag football in PE. Who gets hurt playing flag football? The hardest blow happened a little over a month ago, though. And since then, Mac hadn't been able to climb out of the depression he was in. Grandpa. Mac couldn't think of the man without tears coming to his eyes. I thought you were indestructible. None of us ever dreamed that you'd have a heart attack a few days before Thanksgiving. What am I going to do without you? He wiped his eyes with his flannel shirt sleeve. A tall, strapping man, even in his 70s, Jake Chambers was the epitome of manhood in Mac's eyes. Then suddenly, he was gone. Mac found it hard to be excited about Christmas or anything else in the weeks since. Tonight on Christmas Eve, Mac sat with his chin in his hands, glumly staring at the flames and dwelling on his losses. I worry about him, Chris, his mother Peggy said as she watched him from the kitchen doorway. She wiped her hands on a towel and sighed. Her husband walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and kissed her cheek. I worry too, Peg. Ever since Dad died, Mac's lost his spark. I have an idea, though. What is it? You'll see. I don't want to say too much because I'm not sure if I can pull it off. No sense getting your hopes up. I know you. So I have to see if it's possible first. Dinner will be ready soon. Don't be gone long. I won't. When have I ever missed one of your meals? He winked and headed out the door. Puzzled, Peggy watched her husband plod through the snowy yard to his old red pickup truck. What is he up to this time? Half an hour later, Chris returned home. He was empty-handed as Peggy watched from the window. Her heart dropped. Chris gave her a kiss when he came through the back porch into the kitchen. No luck? He raised his index finger to his lips. Just watch. He leaned around the kitchen doorway and looked into the living room. Hey, Mac, can you come here for a minute? I need you to help me unload the truck. Yeah, sure, Dad. Mac rose from his seat and wiped his red eyes, hoping to hide his tears from his father. It won't take long. I just couldn't bring it in by myself. The two walked out the back door as Peggy placed dinner on the table. Suddenly, Mac burst through the door, and a gust of cold wind and blowing snow came with him. In his arms, he held a wriggling yellow Labrador puppy. He seemed as excited to get Mac for a present as Mac was about the puppy. "Mom, look what Dad had in the truck! He said he's all mine!" Chris followed his son into the house, beaming from ear to ear. "I think our surprise is a success." Chris carried a bag of puppy food and another bag containing toys, a dog food bowl, and treats. Peggy hugged and kissed both Chris and Mac. She leaned over to the puppy that was busy licking Mac's face and said, "Aren't you the cutest thing ever? Mac, you take him into the living room. I'll help your dad put this stuff away." She accompanied Chris back onto the porch. Mac's laughter pealed in the background. "You are a miracle worker. Honey, how did you even know where to get one?" "Well, I saw a notice at the feed store the other day that Doc Gurley had a litter. I wasn't sure if he had any left, but it was worth a try. When I stopped by his house, he only had one left. He told me this guy was the runt. He is kind of a small puppy. Doc assures me that he's healthy and perfect in every way. He said, 'Look at the size of those feet. He'll grow into them and may end up bigger than some of his litter mates. It works that way sometimes.' When I explained to him I was getting it for Mac, he took $100 off the price and said he couldn't think of a better way to cheer up a sad boy. 'This puppy is just what the doctor ordered,' he said." The smile on Mac's face and hearing him laughing again is worth $1 million, Chris. Peggy gave her husband a kiss. "Let's get in and eat supper before it gets cold, though." Sitting around the dinner table that night, it was clear that Mac was a happy boy. He ate better than he had for weeks, and the spark was back in his eyes. After dinner, his dad handed him a collar and leash. "Better take him outside so he can do his business." Mac took his new companion out into the snowy evening. The golden Labrador sniffed his nose around in the snow, nearly as tall as he was, until he found the right spot. And when he finished, he trotted back to Mac's side. "You did that just like a champ, boy. In fact, that's what your name is. Champ." From then on, Mac and Champ were inseparable. Mac returned to being the happy-go-lucky kid he'd been before, and people noticed. One afternoon, Chris came home from a trip into town. "I ran into Doc Gurley, Peg." "Oh yeah? How's he doing?" "He's doing great. Same as always. We talked about Mac. He said, if I'd known that puppy would turn that boy around so fast, I'd have given him that dog. It sure is nice to see some life come back into him, too." I thanked him and let him know he was right about Champ growing into those feet, too. "Lands, yes. That puppy has the biggest appetite I've ever seen. He's turning into a big galoot." Chris laughed. "Lucky for me, you like galoots." "Yes, it's lucky for both of you. He's the perfect addition to our family." "I know how you are about Labradors, so that's why I didn't want to get your hopes up in case they were all gone." "He was meant to be with us, Chris." Champ made all of them happier. He was bright, comical, and loyal. He played hard, but he knew when to be calm. Chris and Peggy adored the pup, but there was no doubt that he was Mac's dog. Champ wasn't the only one getting bigger. Both Mac and Champ grew by leaps and bounds. The football coach took notice and recruited Mac to be a linebacker. Baseball was still his passion, but now he made his mark on the football field too. Months passed and the bond between boy and dog strengthened. Every moment he could, Mac spent with Champ, taking him swimming, playing fetch, and teaching him commands. The next Christmas, Chris handed Mac a present made out to both Champ and the boy. "What's this, Dad?" "A little something I made that I thought you'd both appreciate." Mac opened the box and stared. "This is from one of Grandpa's belts. I knew he'd want you to have this. And I know how happy he'd be to see the love you and Champ have for each other. I made this collar for him out of one of Dad's leather belts, and I had the copper nameplate made that's on it. I hope you like it." Chris held his breath. Mac called Champ over to him and put the collar on him. "I'm never taking this off him, Dad. Thank you." A tear rolled down his cheek as he hugged Champ and rubbed the collar with his thumb. Champ licked the tear away, and Peggy and Chris wiped their own tears. Each year that passed, the connection between Mac and Champ grew. I swear those two know what the other is thinking. Peggy watched the two playing frisbee one summer day as she and Chris stood on the porch. That was the best Christmas gift Mac could ever have received. I'm glad I went with what my heart told me to do that night. Champ brought our boy back to us. We owe that dog. I think he knows we appreciate him. He shows it in his eyes. And Champ did. He loved his family, fiercely. At the end of his senior year, Mac turned down a chance to play college ball to join the local electricians' union. He knew he could earn a good living, and he wanted to get his life started. A certain blue-eyed girl named Gracie had something to do with his decision. Of course, Gracie had Champ's approval, too. When he was 20, Mac and Gracie married, and they and Champ moved into the 2-story, 4-bedroom brick home near the lake that Mac had dreamed of building since he was a boy. Time passed, and 3 children were born, 2 boys and a blue-eyed girl. Champ accepted his responsibility as their guardian as naturally as he had become a part of Mac's life years earlier. He's so good with the kids, honey. I never have to worry about them as long as Champ is with them. Mac put his arms around Gracie. He's remarkable. He saved me when I was 15. I know he'll take good care of our little ones. The children in turn adored their big yellow companion. He went swimming and fishing with them, and he was so calm that for years Mac took him out on the lake in his canoe while he fly fished. Champ sat patiently, happy to spend time with his master. Nothing beats a good dog, Mac would say. Time passed, and Champ's muzzle turned gray. Arthritis made it hard for him to run and play as he once had. The time has come for us to take care of you like you have us, old boy. Mac hugged Champ, whose tail beat a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor where he lay. The dog wanted for nothing in his old age. Finally, on a warm June night, Champ went to sleep in his sheepskin bed and never woke up. After 14 years, he was no longer with the family. Mac cried harder than he had since Grandpa Jake's funeral. They all cried. No one wanted to believe that their constant companion was gone. The whole family gathered round when they buried him under the hickory tree in the backyard. They chose that spot because Champ had a lot of fun by that tree. He chased many squirrels up its branches, and it had a perfect view of the lake that the water-loving Labrador Retriever enjoyed so much. That night, Mac sat beside the fire pit in the backyard. Gracie and the children gave him space to grieve. As much as they all loved Champ, they recognized that the loss Mac felt was profound. Mac stared into the embers, thinking back to that Christmas Eve long ago when he stared at the fireplace and remembered the stories told by his grandfather. Champ and his grandpa were forever a part of Mac, no matter how old he lived to be. Finally, as the last of the embers faded, Mac rose and made his way quietly into the darkened house. Gracie and the children had gone to bed hours before. He slipped into bed and held his wife as he drifted to sleep. The next morning, he walked downstairs to the kitchen where Gracie fixed breakfast. His heart was still weary from his loss. Gracie poured him a cup of coffee and set it before him on the table. She kissed his head and smoothed his disheveled hair. He reached his hand up to meet hers and gently caressed it. Grace, would you mind if I took my grandpa's canoe down to the lake and went fly fishing? As low as I'm feeling, I'm no good for you and the kids to be around. I promise I won't be gone past noon. Gracie leaned over and held her husband. I think it would be good for you. We'll be fine. I know this is hard on you. Take your time and try to find some peace while you're out there. You always know what I need. I love you, Mac. Go get ready, and I'll put something together for you to eat while you're fishing. Mac stood and held her. You're the best. Within 15 minutes, he had the canoe loaded onto his truck and was on his way to the lake. A few short minutes later, he paddled toward Parker's Cove, a favorite spot of his that always brought with it good memories. He picked out a fly from his case and cast his line into the water. the rhythm of the line dancing back and forth in the air with each cast, then lightly landing the fly on the water's surface, was relaxing. It brought order to his mind. Memories ebbed and flowed. Most were happy ones. Days spent fishing with his grandpa Jake, games of fetch with Champ in his youth. The dog never tired of jumping in the water after sticks. "I swear you could spell, Champ. All I had to do was say L-A-K, and you were running for the truck to get in and go." Mark caught himself laughing, and it felt good. The fish weren't biting well, so Mac paddled near a group of downed trees that provided cover for the fish. A few bites reassured him that this had been a smart move. He barely missed setting the hook on a monster bass he watched rise out of the lake. His heart pounded and adrenaline rushed through his body. He stood to get a better look at where to aim his next cast. Around and around his yellow leader flew in the air. The fly landed in a shallow and the water boiled. Mac jerked the line, thrilled to get a hold of the massive fish. The world spun as, for a split second, Mac saw blue sky. The rush of excitement became paralyzing fear. Time seemed to stand still as he felt himself falling backward into the lake. His foot had caught on the bar in the middle of the canoe, and he'd lost his balance. The water rushed over his face, and he thrashed wildly about. His lungs screamed for air, and the water fought to enter his nose, ears, and mouth. The lake was deep, and though his feet struggled to find something to push off of, he felt himself sinking farther and farther below the surface. The glints of sunlight became fainter, and the reality that he was going to die hit him full force. He thought of Gracie and the children, of his parents, so many memories he had wanted to make with them, and the realization of how little time he'd been able to spend with them pierced his heart with pangs of sadness. Hope was lost. He perceived something tugging on his shirt sleeve, but he was quickly losing consciousness. A light grew brighter, and suddenly his feet touched the ground. He was near the shore. He found himself pulled to the muddy bank, where he gasped for air and saw his canoe floating unmanned in the lake 50 yards away. He tried to make sense of what happened. How did I get to shore? Mac's eyes opened wide when he felt something warm and smooth go across his face, wiping the water from his cheek. It stopped after his breathing returned to normal. Confused, he looked around. What was that? He looked to his right. On the ground beside him was a familiar leather collar with an engraved copper nameplate. Champ had saved him one more time. Thank you for joining me for Into the Night, an anthology series written by Caroline Giammanco, narration and sound design by Nari Kwak, theme music by Nico Rodriguez, all original music and editing in part provided by Flyboy Entertainment. You can find our links in the show notes. Please remember to like and subscribe, and if you enjoy what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review to help other excursionists to join us. You can find us on your favorite podcast directory. See you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths take you into the night. Into the Night is a Creative Typo Entertainment production.